On behalf of the Professional Baseball Strength and Conditioning Coaches Society, I'd like to welcome you to the PBSCCS Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Messina.
What advice do you have for others, either young coaches looking to get into the game or older coaches just trying to stay on top of things? What advice do you have?
Yeah, I think that your last question really bridges the gap between kind of the advice I have. My first one is to smile and have fun. I realize that sports and baseball is an entertainment business for the fans, but there's no reason why it can't be entertaining for us. And I think it makes work just that much easier. As you know, and as everyone who's worked in pro ball knows, it's long hours. So if you can surround yourself with people and make the days go by a little bit faster, you're doing yourself a service. Along with that, build relationship with the people you interact on a day-to-day basis, whether that's other coaches, players, staff members in any department. And I think that, again, just make the days go by a little bit easier. Get to know people's names. That's a big one to me. Get to know where they're from. And just try to learn a little bit about them. We have an unbelievable privilege of working with athletes that come from all over the world. It's probably one of the most diverse sports out there, other than, maybe soccer would compete with this. But if we're just thinking about them as baseball players, like I said earlier, I think we're doing ourselves a really big disservice by putting them in that box of baseball player. They have a ton of different experiences. They come from different places. So if you can use that to your advantage, it's a win-win situation.
Yeah, I would agree with all of that, man. I think the building relationships with your day-to-day staff helps so much. It's really hard to hate someone and be around them every day. So you might as well just settle on the differences, because the thing is not everybody's going to have the same beliefs as you, not everybody's going to do things the same way as you, and it's not to say that you have to bend your morals or be somebody different, but to make things run smoothly. And especially you want the players to see that you and the other coaches are on the same page, that you and the other coaches are getting along. If you were to walk into the cage, the hitting coach is welcoming to you, and that goes a long way to the hitters, right? If the hitting coach is like, oh, this guy's in here again, what is he doing? That's not great, right? So even if you hate each other behind closed doors, you got to make it work. You might as well kind of settle the differences, and just it's way too hard to hate somebody for that long and spend that much time with them that you're like, dude, can we just iron this out, please? And then the other thing you said, it's just, I really like the unbelievable privilege to be able to be around not just athletes, but people from all over the world, right? And at the end of the day, we are all just people. They just happen to be really, really good at baseball. That's the bottom line. And we happen to be really, really knowledgeable, hopefully, at strength and conditioning, right? The athletic trainers really good at doing athletic training duties. But that isn't who we are, and that shouldn't be who they are. They are people, and getting to know them for me it's been incredibly rewarding to just know people outside of who they are for baseball. And baseball has strength and conditioning as a whole, right? Kind of affords us an opportunity to meet people that we would not necessarily meet from places in the world that we would not necessarily go. And having been in the big leagues, I've been to so many cities that I would have never traveled to if I was never in strength and conditioning. So really taking the time to slow down and appreciate that, and understand that the person that's in front of you, if they're having a bad day, they are human and they are allowed to have a bad day. And sometimes they come to you and they vent or they take it out on you, and it's not out of hatred towards you. Usually it's the fact that they feel comfortable around you, is really hard to handle sometimes, because you feel like you're wearing some of their struggles. But it's just I don't know, man. It's just been a really cool journey to be around some really fascinating people. Um, the other thing is a lot of them have a little bit more money than some of us do, so they get to go to cool places. And they're like, I went to this trip to somewhere in the middle of nowhere, and I was riding elephants, and look at these pictures, and like it just opens opportunities to connect and talk about different things. Like yourself, even before we got on, we were talking about my brother playing hockey in Ottawa, like that kind of stuff is cool. And our paths may have never crossed if it wasn't for baseball. I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, there's so many people out there. And then when you take that to your regular life, and you go to the grocery store and you happen to run into somebody who's like, I don't know, a neurosurgeon who's on the cutting edge of something, you just never know who you're going to meet. And I think sometimes we go into just cruise control in life, and it's like, all right, I'm in the grocery store. All right, I'm in the mall. All right, I'm here. All right, I'm on a plane. I'm putting my headphones in. I'm not talking to anybody. And that person sitting next to you could be the next president. You don't know. Like, that's a bit of an exaggeration, but just to make a point there, right? Like, you just never know. And I think sometimes that gets lost on us in the grind. You said it's long hours. It's a lot of days out of the year. Sometimes you're traveling. You don't see your significant others for weeks at a time. And really taking that step back and leaning on those people that you've built the relationships with, and really understanding how crazy the job is that you're doing, and like how privileged you are to have it, I think really does help keep things in perspective.
No doubt. Well said.
What do you believe makes a strength and conditioning coach successful, maybe in general, and then more specifically in the professional setting?
Yeah, I think that's a really hard question. I know that that's a question that we kind of ask at our interviews when we're trying to hire new people. And so I'm glad you're asking me, and hopefully the Royals can see that I've kind of thought of it a little bit. But I think at the core, a strength and conditioning coach is considered successful based on his ability to get his athletes to buy into a certain program, whatever that may be, and finding consistency in that program. Um, and underneath that, I think there's a lot of qualities that you can display or can have that'll allow you to do that. For example, great leadership qualities. I think most strength and conditioning coaches are natural leaders and have developed their leadership skills in some capacity. Your abilities to speak publicly, you're usually working in larger groups. And so you've got to be able to, say what you need to say, kind of take control of a situation. Resolving conflict, you're dealing, good, bad, or ugly, you're dealing with a lot of different athletes like we've talked about. And a lot of times that's really enjoyable, but in some other situations, they may have different viewpoints than yours. And so you've got to be able to have one-on-one conversations, explain your viewpoint, listen to them as well, and find some sort of compromise. In pro ball, certainly you have to be adaptable. Like we've said, we've been to places where they had all the resources in the world, and there's other places where you're working out, outside a hotel on the front lawn. So in pro ball, that's certainly an asset. And finally, I think, like we've touched on earlier, being able to work with different departments in professional baseball, that's certainly the direction that I think most teams are going, and it's only going to continue to be really important for the development of the athletes that we're working with. The college kids, they come from some really good, programs, D1 programs that have a ton of resources and staff members. And we've got to kind of continue that sort of model that they've been through if they've had it. And if they haven't, we've just got to be able to offer the best service to them. And the only way to do that is to work with the other support staff and the on-field staff as well.
You feel that as a coach, it takes different attributes to be successful at different levels? Like, what made you a really good strength coach in AAA makes you a really good strength coach in the ACL in general? And then there's different things that helped you kind of individually at those levels? Or do you think just being a good coach is being a good coach regardless of where you're at?
I think there's definitely differences across the levels, like we've touched on earlier, but I think in due time, everyone uh, can find a place in a different setting. I don't think And I feel like a lot of the players and maybe other staff members would say that I wasn't necessarily ready for the AAA position at the time where I got it. But you kind of learn from your mistakes, and you find your place. Like I said, your personality or the people that you can gravitate towards. I'll get a message across. If you do the things that I brought earlier, I believe that over time you can kind of find your niche at whatever level or whatever situation you're put into, as long as you're willing and you're interested in it. So I think naturally we probably have a better fit somewhere. But if you are adaptable and you're willing to communicate with other people, I don't see a reason why you wouldn't be able to be successful at, the lower levels versus the higher levels. It's a privilege to probably work at a higher level over time. It's something you have to kind of earn. And if you can make people realize that you earned it just as much as they've earned their place on the team, then that can go a long way.
Yeah, I think that's really fair. I'm just thinking kind of along my own journey as well. And I was definitely not prepared to go to AA when I went for my first year. And my first road trip was just a disaster. I felt so overwhelmed. And I had left baseball after my first year when I was in Bristol. And I was like, no, I'll give it another shot. I think I'm just missing something. And like I said, my first road trip, I was like, nope, same exact thing. Like I made a mistake coming back. And thankfully, I built a really good relationship with the athletic trainer there who's still in baseball. And he and I are still very close. And he had been around for a little bit longer than I had. He kind of helped guide me. He kind of helped me to connect with the manager. And then, you make adjustments along the way. And then, like you said, the skills that you have that you're good at, like, I think they will play across every level. You just have to execute them a little bit differently, I think, based on who's in the room and the tone of the group and the type of people you're connecting with. And being adaptable, being able to communicate effectively is good in general, and then those skills specifically make adjustments based on if front office is in the room versus the manager versus your best friend versus first year rookie ball player versus the top player on your major league roster. Like, they're still the same skills, they're just implemented a little bit differently. And I think the more that you're in and the more years that you spend and you take the time to audit yourself and make adjustments, I think that's how you learn to kind of navigate those situations. But it's hard because honestly, like, you kind of have to be thrown into places you're not supposed to be. And it really sucks to fail, especially when you're young and you're insecure in the field. Where now I'm like, I had a bad session the other day. Like, objectively, this is what I could have done better. Like, I'll fix it. Where when you're younger, it's like kind of a hit to your ego a little bit. And you're like, I don't know if I'm cut out for this. So I think that really makes sense to me. Especially like looking back on my own journey while you're talking, it just kind of rings true for me. And I think the other thing too is when I first got in, a lot of minor league positions were part-time, and it was like, again, we talked about this earlier, but it's like, I want to move up. I want to get to the big leagues because those are the full-time positions. Those are the recognized positions, where now there's, a ton of coaches who are really good, who are just making a living being in the minor leagues and, taking that time off in the off season to gather themselves and travel and do whatever they want. And then they come back ready to rock, and pay is a little bit better. The schedule is a little bit better with the same day off every week. And, sometimes you're just a really good fit in AA and you're not a really good fit in AAA. Sometimes you're not cut out for the big leagues, but you are cut out for, I don't know, a minor league coordinator. Sometimes you are the best short season strength coach that you've ever seen, but you don't want to go to the ACL. You want to still travel. So yeah, I would agree with you. I think there is a place for everybody. And I think the unfortunate thing is, like, cutting your teeth and like really failing is kind of tells you where you're going to end up before you find success. So me personally, if anybody's listening and you really want to pursue baseball, it'll probably punch you in the face. You'll probably not want to do it. And if you can get back up, like, you'll find your place in the game. I don't know if you would agree, but that's kind of how, that's how it was personally for me.
Yeah, definitely. I think my first year in AAA, like I was the new guy coming into a team that had already probably been together in 2019, and with the pandemic, obviously there were changes, but I was the new guy, and by the end of it, like it's a whole new group, and you're the experienced individual that's showing the players around. So you've got to be able to immerse yourself in a setting where other people are already comfortable in. The rookie ball is probably the only place where most people are new. But after the fact, like some people are repeating levels, whether it's staff members or players. And so you're just trying to find where you fit in that grand scheme of things. Um, and if you're willing to take those hits, at some point you're going to be the person, not necessarily in charge, but with that experience, and with that comfort, helping other people along the way. So you've got to be able to kind of, learn from your mistakes and get back up when things don't go your way, for sure.
Yeah, it's a really good way to put it. It's just immersing yourself where other people are already comfortable. It's kind of like you walk in a room and there's like 10 people in the corner and they're all talking. And then when you walk in, the room like goes quiet and everybody looks at you and it's like, what's the move you're going to make? And then next thing you know, like you're the one in the corner, like, running the show, and then somebody else comes in and hopefully you're like, no, let's let that person come in. Let's accept them because, you want to be accepted when you come in, but it's not always easy. And I would say that doesn't just apply to professional baseball. I think if you were to leave baseball today and go to a new place, like everybody that's there has probably been there, they probably feel comfortable, and you have to kind of find your way there. And it takes time, and you have to be willing to take your lumps. You have to be humble enough and vulnerable enough to kind of accept when things don't go well and just make those adjustments. But yeah, I think that's really good regardless of baseball or not, to be honest.
It's like the new kid in class, right?
Yes.
That's what it is.
Yes. The transfer student. Like, who's this dude?
Yeah.
How about continuing education resources that you'd recommend? Either books to read, seminars to attend, podcasts that you listen to. Where are you going to stay on top of things?
Yeah, I think like most people, I try to stay up to date in some form or fashion of as far as strength and conditioning, and where the field is going. If there's a new kind of piece of equipment, technology, this or that's coming out, or new research that's coming out. But where I think I see the most growth, in my personal development, is to kind of branch out and find things that don't directly relate to strength and conditioning, but I can apply on a day-to-day kind of setting. And so there are a certain books that I've read in the last couple of years that I've really taken some key messages to. Um, and the first one is Atomic Habits, by James Clear. And he talks about making small changes and making small little habits throughout your day, that can, over time create some really good results. And there's a lot to it as far as, people that are addicted to drugs or that just have some poor habits. How do you kind of fix those? So that was a really interesting book, that I sometimes refer back to. A second one is called Thinking in Bets, uh, by Annie Duke. And she really talks about kind of the decision-making process when you're forced to make a decision. How do you weigh those odds, of, leaning one way versus another when things aren't necessarily black or white? And another really key message from that book is to not get caught up in the results. And I know in baseball, that's a huge thing. So I was able to kind of relate it back to that. You might have gone 0 for 3, but you've smoked the ball 3 times and the outfielders made unbelievable plays. And so if you've made decisions, good decisions, time over time, those results are gonna show in the long run. So that's really a good example, I think, of taking a book that doesn't speak about baseball, but being able to apply it to our setting, or to our career. And the last one may be a little bit more popular, a little more current, but it's called Range, by David Epstein. And he talks about the generalist versus being a specialist, that kind of dilemma, and pros and cons of both. So whether you really want to focus on one aspect and dive right in, or should you be able to, do a couple things pretty well. And he uses a lot of sport examples, but he uses music, business, languages, arts, all of this to really prove his point. And I think it was a well-written book.
Yeah, I think the longer you're in the field, the more you're like, okay, I've read the same super training a dozen times. I've read the X's and O's a dozen times. Like, I would probably agree. It's more like somebody brings in a new piece of tech and they're like, oh, we're gonna try this out. Like, oh, okay, let me dive into that. But then most of my reading is kind of non-strength and conditioning. Um, I'll listen to podcasts on the drive into work or whatever, or in the morning when I'm brushing my teeth, and they're kind of in the background. But yeah, I don't know. I've found myself more getting away from strength and conditioning reading as I get older, but also leaning on the people in my circle of like, hey, I heard somebody say this. Can you elaborate? What are your thoughts on this? And like, I think I've built up a big enough network for myself that if I have questions, I can go to different people. So I'm like, if I read a book, it's good, but I'm only getting that author's thoughts that immediate moment. And if I'm reading it even a week later after it's been published, like their whole mindset might have changed. You never know unless you ask them directly. So yeah, I definitely like that. I'll definitely be looking into it. Everybody's been saying Atomic Habits is one to read, and it's been on my list a while. So I'm circling it now as one that I need to order. But I appreciate the time that you've spent with me. I don't want to keep you all night. You have obviously the busy baseball schedule that I want to keep you, in line with. But if you have time, I'd like to do a lightning round with you.
Yeah, let's do it. Before we do it though, I think one thing that I wanted to add to what you said is that I think one of the lost arts is um, like being able to just go visit other facilities. That's one thing that I need to do a way better job at. But if I am going to do something strength and conditioning related to as far as continuing that my development, I think I need to do way more of that. And I would encourage a lot of people to do it and do it for the right reasons, not to just, put your name out there, but just to really learn about other people's processes and the way they do things. Um, and if you build a great relationship, that's what we all want. But um, I think if people are doing that right now, I feel and I fear that too often they're doing it just to say like, "Hey, I want you to recognize me down the road," as opposed to like, "I think I can gain something from going to see you." So I hope that this off season I can do a little bit more of it. It is hard and it takes commitment from a lot of different people, but from a truly strength and conditioning standpoint, I think that's one thing that hasn't been explored enough, at least for me.
We'll talk about this one more off camera, but you can come visit
Sure.
anytime you want for sure.
Let's do it.
All right. So getting to the lightning round, 4 questions, as long or as short of answers as you'd like. First question: who is your biggest influence in the field of strength and conditioning?
Yeah, that one kind of, I had a really hard time answering. I can't put one person down. I think I've been to a lot of places, different cities, and I've gained something from everywhere I've gone as far as every experience. Um, and so I don't want to kind of name one name because I think it discredits the work that everyone else has done. Um, but in order for me to be able to pursue my strength and conditioning career, I've had to rely a lot on family, friends, and coworkers. We've talked about it's long hours, and you kind of get consumed by this baseball world. So to be able to get away from it and just FaceTime your mom, your dad, your girlfriend, or your buddies from back home, that's been really helpful for me to know that, even if I don't see them for 8 months out of the year, they're still supporting me. And even early on, just being able to travel or to move from Ottawa to Calgary, I had self-doubt, but people reassured me that like this is something you should be doing. Um, and so I really want to take the time to appreciate them. And I think they've been more valuable than any quote unquote mentor that I've had just to kind of push me along the way.
Yeah, I can totally respect that. Um, if you only had one piece of equipment to train with, what would it be?
Yeah, I hated that question. I think it's I'm someone that kind of looks at like a problem, a performance problem, if you will, and tries to think of what solution I can come up with. And so I don't think there's a single piece of equipment that can solve all problems, but I tried to find the one that would solve most. And so I came up with some sort of, functional cable trainer. I think you could do a little bit of lower body, upper body, a little bit of explosive work and some core. Um, So it's kind of a boring answer, I guess, but that's the way I think. That's what I would want.
Biggest accomplishment professionally and or personally?
Yeah, I'm really proud of all the things I've been able to do, in the last 10 years that have gotten me here, and the learning that I've done throughout that time. But personally, being able to buy a house in Arizona last year with all the change in job and whatnot is something that I'm really, really proud of. And um, it gives me something to look forward to every night, either, before work or after work at night, little projects here and there to kind of just get my mind away from work. And it's something that I've been thinking about for a long time from a stability standpoint. So to be able to, put my foot down and build some roots from here is going to be awesome. And I look forward to it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Arizona's a great place to settle too. So,
Yeah.
any career other than strength and conditioning, what would you choose?
Yeah, that one, I think a lot of people are the same where we get stuck in this sport mindset. So I'm sorry if it's very sport like, but the easy answer is to be like a gym teacher. I think I've always been a promoter of physical activity, and I think people are moving less and less. So if I could kind of counteract that in some way, but both my parents were teachers, and so if I had to pick something different, just to not follow their footsteps, um, I think I would enjoy working in some sort of event coordinating for like a massive sporting event, whether that's the Olympics, like a World Cup of soccer, a Super Bowl, um, Final Four at college. Um, just because the buzz around that city is always fun. I've been to some of those events, but probably smaller settings than that. But whenever you go to a sport event, I enjoy it, and I would want people to enjoy it just as much. And maybe on the funnier side, I'm definitely not qualified for this, but how awesome would it be to be just like a PGA golf caddy for a pro athlete and just visiting the best courses in the world? I'd probably ruin their game, but if I could do it, I would.
Yeah, this is all under the assumption that you've either studied under somebody or you've got the
Yes.
skill set to do it. So I haven't gotten that one, which is really surprising with how much people like to golf nowadays. But yeah, it would be a pretty nice life to enjoy. It's been really nice to get to know you and to connect with you. And I know that we'll continue this connection in the future. But if the listeners want to get in touch with you, where is the best place? Is it social media or somewhere better?
Yeah, likewise, Chris. That was awesome. I'm glad we were able to connect. I'm not, big into social media. I have all the platforms, but I'm not very active on them. But if people want to follow me and look at pictures of where I'm traveling, I guess, or things of that nature, not really work related, um, you can put it in the description if you want. But it's at YANNPLANTZ. That's for Twitter and Instagram. So like I said, it's more personal than professional. And from a professional standpoint, it would probably have to be LinkedIn, which is my name, or my work email, first name dot last name at royals.com.
Well, I appreciate your time and the fact that we're both in AZ. I'm sure we'll be spending some more time, and next time maybe we can talk some hockey and less baseball. But good luck the rest of the season. We'll definitely be talking soon.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, everybody, that's going to conclude part 2 of our 2-part episode with Yannick. I hope you were able to enjoy both part 1, where he discussed working at different levels in the minor leagues, and part 2 here, where we talked advice and finding success and continuing education resources. 3 things that I took from Yannick in this part of the episode: take a step back every once in a while to smile and enjoy yourself. Take time to visit other coaches and facilities to make the most of your learning opportunities. And being good at public speaking, resolving conflicts, and adapting to constantly changing environments can help make you a successful strength and conditioning coach. With that being said, I hope you enjoyed this episode, and we'll talk to you again on the next one.